Hello there everybody! Right, so the subject for today's video is a bit of an interesting one because it's a response video to some stuff, and it's not really one I was hoping I'd ever have to make, but here we go. So, for those who don't know anything about this fellow YouTuber, there's so much I want to say on this topic, we're gonna have to break this one up into sections. For those of you who don't know, Tecosaurus is a YouTuber slash fan of the thing currently known as the Arrowverse, something that is in fact very important. The point here being that right now, the whole Arrowverse thing has led Teco to decide to make a fan game on it, something for which I even played a part in helping. But, well, we'll get to that later. Point in case currently being that right now, above all things, I have currently even started working on my own fan game, and, yeah, people aren't too thrilled about it. Now, I'm going to make this perfectly clear, because I'm not sure why it wasn't already. I do not particularly think that people should be in a position to criticise if there's nothing to criticise. So let's get on to the fact that there is needless criticism and the current timeline of events. Okay, starting off with the current timeline of events, things are fairly simple. Guy makes fan game, guy gets big over fan game, guy asks for help with fan game, and then suddenly guy is trying to criticise everyone. Now, bearing in mind that the people mostly criticise are me and Dylan. Fucking Dylan! Why is Dylan being criticised? The only reason Dylan is working on my game is because I was working on his and then ended up separating due to creative differences. Not only that, but the fact is we agreed that the separation may well be a good thing. We had no real reason to want to keep working on a game together where we knew there was a toxic environment in places. This was our way of trying to sort that. And yet I am utterly confused on why this is such a big deal. If people could tell me why, maybe stably, then yeah, sure, go ahead. But the fact that this is actually a thing, regardless, I just don't know. Now, bearing in mind that the game I'm working on is very heavily story-based, it's quite well known that obviously because of that, whilst people don't always share the same sort of skills as someone like Teco, you're immediately open to his criticism of not actually being able to, well, make games. And more often than not, he's very open on calling it fanfiction making. To add another person into the mix, we've got this guy called Alex from Technomancer Studios or something, who suddenly has piped up saying that and I do have screenshots of the message to show it, that apparently, due to all the bad things he's heard about me, he doesn't want to work with me. Something I don't really find to be genuine, especially since after the people called him out, the only bad thing he said was very repetitive stuff that I'd heard from both Teco and his brother Cottage. So let's move on to these so-called bad things they've heard about me. Alright, so it's going to be fairly obvious and fairly simple by now that obviously, for a very long time, I was ignoring a lot of this. I had no reason to want to react. I didn't particularly want to give out any overall attention or anything like that into something I felt was going to cause more problems. One such example would be that people just don't really know when to stop for some reason. I'll say one thing that's already fairly obvious though, is that a lot of this seems to be from the fact that I can't program stuff. Now, I've made it clear before, and I guess I need to make it clear again, is that not everyone can program. Not everyone has those particular sets of skills. Now, if I was someone who was working on the game on my own, and I were trying to announce it, then that would make perfect sense. But I wasn't. I was always looking around for a group of people to assist me in the area of that. Now, let me get this a bit closer to people who don't really seem to understand, but again, like, what do you want me to say? The whole thing, from what I can tell, seems to be going off a few things that happened between me and Teco, and I'll get to those shortly. But I have actually explained to both Teco and Cottage multiple times why I do not have the ability to learn to program right now due to largely time constraints, to which their response is, well, why are you making this game? At the time where things became so busy in the area of my actual real-life stuff, not once was there a need to actually, consider that I may need to learn to program. Now, the need itself, yeah, sure, that's there. I'll give you credit. And by the way, just to try and make this clear, I'm not doing this video to cause beef with anyone. I'm simply trying to call people like Teco out who've let things like their ego get to them. And trust me, I've got an entire section dedicated to that soon. But let me just point out as simply as I can. Not everyone has the same sets of skills as someone like Tecosaurus. Now, the reasons I explained to Teco, Cottage, and even others that I don't really have time to learn programming is due to things like currently working on moving, IRL, working a job that I could be called into at any time, and what little time I do have when I'm not checking on things the fan game is doing or doing things for it behind the scenes anyway, I want to try and, I don't know, save for myself so I do get some time just so I don't completely lose my sanity. Seems to be fairly reasonable to me. But there we go. Also, I find it very hypocritical that Teco's actually trying to call me out on this, because as this next section will explain, you are not the person to be doing that. Right, so it's quite clear that Teco got fairly big, in terms of YouTube anyway, off of a handout by other people. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The problem arises when you just simply refuse to acknowledge it. Especially because now, this is causing all kinds of problems that people really just don't need. Now, yes, it's understandable on why you find this necessary, but didn't you also happen to upload a video at some point asking for help? I seem to remember you doing that, and that suddenly comes out after you get big after a shout out from another YouTuber. That YouTuber was Comic Books vs. the World. Now, let me just point out to you, Teco, again, I'm not saying this to try and cause any drama, but I do feel like this needs to be said. Overall, you did not get big on YouTube and have 30,000 plus subs at the time of recording this video because you worked super hard and grinded for it in terms of YouTube videos. You were just lucky that a bigger YouTuber saw awesome stuff you did and decided he really liked it. That's the reason you have so many subs. And I'll point out now that I've got no doubt in my mind you'd have probably ended up blowing up anyway, just probably at a bit of a later date, especially since, for some reason, you seem to view this whole thing as necessary to go around criticising other fan games. Because it's not just mine you've been doing it to. You've done it to Dylan's, you've done it to mine, you've done it to all kinds of people's. And I do want to point out that while I can understand giving criticism that's constructive, what you're doing is seemingly trying to bash them down because it's very competitive on your part. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with being competitive. I have no issue with it, and I'd probably be the same if I were in your position. But also, I probably wouldn't be so look at me, I'm better than everyone about it. Now, I'm not saying that's completely what you are. I'm just saying you're probably letting the fact that you're more competitive get to your head a little bit, but there we go. Again, I'm the one who's been trying to ignore this whole thing for a long time, to the point that people have said, you need to respond to this. Ignoring it isn't working anymore. Also, Teco, just remind me, didn't you say to me that before Comic Books vs. the World shouted you out, you only had 30 subscribers? Because, again, you got lucky. You didn't really do much of the work for the YouTube growing yourself. And yeah, now a lot of the stuff you pump out in terms of your videos does seem to be legit, and credit to you for it. I have no ill feelings towards you because you're successful in something that's genuinely yours. But there is now this point, the endless and needless criticism incarnate. One of Teco's favourite hobbies when he's not working on the game is to try and simply just go ahead and for some reason put this whole thing in something fairly stupid. And for me, that is quite clearly what Teco has been doing when he's criticised two other fan games that I know of, including mine, that are not his. And don't get me wrong, I've nothing against Teco for wanting to be competitive, but there is a point where you need to end the criticism and actually decide, hang on, maybe I could offer some help to these people. Not that you're necessarily obliged to, especially since you're just not going to, and I have no real issue with that. Just, Teco, if you don't want to, own it. That's all I can advise you to do. Okay, no one's going to care if you can do whatever for whatever reason. But let me point out one thing to you. It's not really going to do any favours if you keep deciding you want to go ahead and cause problems by giving games endless criticism where they don't really need it. Some games will take a while to get off their feet. And hell, need I remind you, you have been working on your game a lot longer than I've been working on mine. Now, I know to some this is going to seem like an unfair statement, and I can sort of see why, especially because for someone like Teco who's found success doing this kind of thing with fan games, it's very understandable why you'd be very competitive about it. The problem with that arises when you are being a bit obnoxious about it, and it's seen very clearly. Now, that's not to say that Teco is a completely obnoxious guy. I really doubt that he is. But overall, if we're going to be honest, what exactly is Teco doing apart from just being out there to criticise the community constantly? I don't really see this being a major point of argument, and that's even if he does respond. And truthfully, I do not expect him to. or at least not on video. But Teco, you have spammed messages publicly where you've bashed people who don't have time to learn to program and claims that this means they can't make fan games. I'm flashing them up on the screen right now. You simply can't be in a position where you are the one who decides what means people can make a fan game and what means people can't. And yeah, sure, you could argue that you've popularized this trend, and that's not exactly untrue. You certainly have popularized it. But I'm not looking to try and cause drama. I've no bad feelings towards you, and I know you don't have any towards me, despite a few small things that have happened. So let's break those down. All I did to you was make a joke about not liking Constantine, because at the time I didn't, and then later on accidentally leak some stuff from your game, which never really mattered anyway because you made your whole story void. You can't completely go ahead and say that that makes us arch enemies, because you quite clearly don't care. You let that be public enough. Let's just make this clear. I have no real issue with the fact that you really want to just go ahead and say things like, oh, you can't program, you can't make a fan game, which sounds a lot like a load of BS. Now, it's understandable if you want to try and say it's just criticism or jokes, but Teco, here's the thing. Not everyone's going to appreciate your sense of humor where at times in your videos it's very genuine. Like, sure, you can make a few comments or edited clips or program you in a voice acting studio or whatever to try and make your content seem more funny while you're doing your update videos. That kind of humor is great. The kind of humor when it means you need to publicly bash other people's fan games and things that they're doing, I'm not really sure what comes under it, but there we go. What more can I say? Apparently I'm a guy who doesn't really have a platform to stand on because he can't program or code. Now, let me put this out there. I have no issue with people making jokes about me. You want to make jokes, knock yourself out. I don't really care. But at the same time, what I think you need to acknowledge is that not everyone's going to appreciate it if you keep going around just looking to bash their fan game. I mean, it's quite clear that they're not. Well, I even have a message from someone named Poison Break, which I'll flash up a screenshot of now, where basically even she's saying that, yeah, this whole hate thing is stupid. Loads of people can't code or program, and you're the only one really getting the public hate for it. Teco, this is quite clearly something that either you've started by having too many sour jokes, which, yeah, fine, it's understandable at times, but then why is this even an argument that matters? I don't really seem to recall this whole thing being that people are against you constantly. No one's trying to steal the fact you made this trend. If anything, people want to acknowledge it. I'm only asking that you simply give people time so they can actually get better at this kind of thing. Not everyone's able to learn to program for various reasons. You can't exactly try and force it to happen. It's not going to work. Like, sure, you may have the time to do an hour's practice with something like Unreal Engine each day. That's not going to be the same for everyone. A lot of people are very busy. And come on, why this is even a source of debate, I don't know. And I have no real desire to know why. What I do somewhat hope you do is a response video to this so I know that you've gotten the message and you understand why I'm criticizing you for this. Because even if you're the one who sorted out this trend and you directly sort of popularized it or made it in terms of fan creation related projects, it's quite clear that you just are trying to criticize people too much. I don't really have a problem with that, but if you're going to offer that much criticism, you could at least offer help in forms of things like maybe helping the games get more popular. Because here's another thing, Teco, which is going to be my last point of this whole thing. Right, so Teco, let's not forget, you got big, okay? You got shouted out. Not everyone has the kind of support coming forward towards you. So it's understandable not everyone's going to have the kind of quick level progress that you want to see from fan games. Especially if other people have things like time constraints, school, and these are things you've said you've understood in DMs when I've messaged you about it. Because you've even approached me asking why has it taken so long for Lightning's Retribution to finally get going. There's you are, and granted this video would not be considered an answer to that, but it's not really meant to be. Like, this is just meant to be something I am saying so people finally understand that yes, this is something legitimate, and it's clearly just not me who's going to say it. Whether or not someone like Dylan wants to make a response video to this, he probably won't. I mean, he's a bit of a melt. Then sure, go ahead, but Teco, understand this. I may not have any ill feelings towards you. I never have. But just seriously, maybe tone down the ego in the competition, because not everyone's able to get big off of handouts like you did. because you won't then have thousands of people coming and swarming to offer their support to you for various reasons. In fact, if anything, I'd say just be lucky that things are even going as well as they are, for Christ. If you were in the position where because Dylan's been developing his fan game for roughly the same amount of time, then I really don't know what you'd have me say. But all I really know for certain right now is that this is quite clearly just a bit stupid. It's not going to matter overall, but let me just put this out there. Teco, I don't really know how many more times I can say this. You've got support from other people. Not everyone has that kind of luxury. A lot of us have to make do with what we get. So if it means that, for example, you think we're allowing the first person that offers anything into our fan game, then once again consider we do not have the same kind of luxury of as many supporters as you do. You have tried changing this admittedly when you created a Discord fan game hub where you allowed some to gain popularity, but no one really offered to help in terms of dev team stuff, or at least not that was very publicly seen. Because the channel you had there for development help was understandably privated, with certain permissions granted to people to enter and chat, which is understandable because people don't want their games leaked. And obviously, what I leaked was fairly minor. I barely knew anything. Let me also just remind you, Teco, that this happened over a year ago. You're quite clearly not salty about it because you've said before you're fine with it. So, be fine with it. Is it really an issue for people if they just decide that, hang on, enough is enough, we want to, I don't know, be able to get on with our projects without endless criticism? I think it's more than fair, but there we go, that's my take. Anyhow, that's my excuse for making this video. I don't know what anyone else's would be. Sorry it's been such a long ramble, but I feel like there was a lot to say. If ever I feel the need necessary, I'll make another video responding to this Alex guy from Technomancer Studios, because trust me mate, you're just a bit of a melt as well, so let me put that out there. Again, no hard feelings towards Teco here, I just want to call him out and try and make him realise that you're probably letting your ego get in the way a bit. Cheers son, have a good day, night, evening or even morning, and as always, peace.